It can take years for victims of sexual abuse to come forward. We know sometimes they never do. But as the fall of Gateway Church founder Robert Morris shows us all, even decades later, speaking up can have consequences for both the accused as well as the accuser. Tonight, Andrea Lucia speaking with CINDY CLEMISHIRE about what it took for her to finally open up.
That having the truth be heard, it's changed the way I feel about myself.
It's been 7 weeks since CINDY CLEMISHIRE's story first appeared in print.
Did you have any idea it would get this big of a response?
People from other countries have messaged me, so I probably didn't expect that.
Within days, Robert Morris, the pastor of one of the country's largest megachurches, would resign, and Gateway Church would pledge to investigate what he called inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady.
I call it child sexual abuse.
It began, CINDY says, on Christmas night, 1982, the same day this picture was taken. She was 12, and Morris, she says, asked her to come to his room.
I did not understand what was going on.
Morris, at the time, was a traveling preacher who, with his wife and children, would often stay with CINDY's family. Over the next 4.5 years, CINDY says he molested her at least 100 times, until the day a family friend, worried about a similar incident with another man, asked her.
She said, "Has anybody else ever done this to you?" And I just looked at her and didn't say anything. I said I promised I would never tell anyone. And we sat down on the floor, and she held my hands, and I closed my eyes, and I said his name.
Her parents' close relationship with the Morris family abruptly ended, and for CINDY, it seemed like everything changed.
I felt like it ruined everything in my life to tell. And my dad, of course, was grieving. He was really angry with himself.
Over the next 2 decades, CINDY says she shared what happened with close friends and counselors. She remembers one in particular.
I couldn't understand why she called it abuse. I said, he's not being mean. It wasn't aggressive. He was very playful or seductive, I guess. That's the word Oprah used. That's when I really understood what happened.
In 2005, Oprah Winfrey, a rape victim herself, began a campaign to raise awareness of how child molesters groom their victims.
But because it's a lure, it's a seduction, I think it should be called child seduction and assault.
I emailed him. Okay. After I saw the Oprah show. I was very angry, and rightfully so.
Emails provided by CINDY's attorney show she wrote Morris, "I have suffered almost my entire life from the emotional damage you inflicted on me. You have had almost no consequences." A little over a year later, an attorney writing on her behalf reached out to demand damages for harm caused to her by Morris sexually assaulting her, beginning when she was 12 years old. Morris's attorney responded, "It was your client who initiated inappropriate behavior by coming into my client's bedroom and getting in bed with him," and accused her of demanding $2 million to avoid publicizing their inappropriate conduct.
I was so mortified because I knew I had not pursued anything, but I also knew if we proceeded with anything in court, they would say those things about me. And I was 35 and I was pregnant. I had a son that was 2, I had a son that was 15. To think that all of that would be out there for public information, I was not in any way prepared for that type of humiliation.
It was CINDY's children, though, who would help her change her mind. Her son, she says, nearly became a victim himself.
There was a dad at his school that was grooming, and I caught it and stopped the communication. He was privately messaging him, asking for pictures.
You understood what was happening because of your own experience?
Yes, yes. I don't know that I would have been aware. And I think that's a big part of why I am okay with sharing now.
Earlier this year, a mutual friend urged her to reach out to the editor of the Wartburg Watch, Dee Parsons.
I'm an example of what happens when a church screws up a sex abuse situation.
Motivated by what she considers her own former church's mishandling of abuse, Dee began writing about the issue 15 years ago.
My whole world kind of tipped upside down. So I started a blog. My husband said I kicked over a hornet's nest.
Since then, Dee says she's interviewed hundreds of survivors and confronted churches.
But I always start off by saying I'm a committed Christian. And then people spend a lot of time telling me why I'm not a Christian because I'm doing what I'm doing.
When her friend warned her Cindy might be calling,
Then he said, you know, it's about Robert Morris, so you better buckle up. This could be a rough ride.
I called her and we had about a 2.5-hour conversation.
Within 4 minutes, I knew she was telling me the truth.
She stopped me mid-sentence.
And I said, stop for a minute. I just want you to know that I totally believe your story. And I said, and I'm close to tears right now. I see this a lot.
Cindy's story quickly became her most viewed ever.
There is absolutely no question. It has been overwhelming.
In an initial statement, Gateway elders said Morris had been open and forthright about a moral failure he had over 35 years ago, and that he'd even spoken about his redemption from the pulpit. They later claimed they were unaware Cindy had only been 12.
The next morning, the Christian Post reached out to me. I mean, they just quoted me word for word. He put his fingers inside of me. So I realized the impact that had on people, because unless you hear the details, it's easy to think it's not that bad.
Letters or emails, texts, whatever I got at my blog were very upsetting. There are people within the church saying why he shouldn't resign and how dare I do that to the pastor.
I've had one phone call in particular. He was very aggressive and was telling me how I was destroying a church.
At the same time, there were other letters coming. You know, I am sorry that this happened at our church.
So many other victims thanking me, like a 90-year-old lady. Happened to her when she was 14, had 20 different counselors, and she thanked me for being her voice. I mean, that is life-changing to read that my story made a difference in her life after all those years.
Cindy says speaking out has brought her peace.
If it helps all those people, men and women that have reached out, I'm glad that I've done it.
Despite all they've experienced, Cindy and Dee both still identify as Christian, and that's remarkable, Doug, because Dee estimates between 80 to 85% of church sex abuse survivors end up leaving the faith because of it.
If you think basic human nature, you can completely understand that, right? So I'm curious, with this huge move for Cindy, what comes next for her? Did she discuss anything with you about what's around the corner?
Yeah, she wants to keep speaking up and speaking out for victims. She's going to be a keynote speaker at the SNAP conference, that's the Survivors Network for people abused by priests. She also plans to push for changes in the law to make it easier for victims to hold their abusers accountable.
And there's no way we could put a button on this about or put a button at the end of this without asking about Robert Morris. Do we know where he is? Do we know what's going on with him? Because we've not heard anything for quite a while now.
Right, yeah. Initially, he released a statement saying that he confessed and repented for this back in 1987. We haven't heard from him since then. We aren't sure where he is or how to reach him. Gateway says he's no longer employed there. Daystar Television says it's ended its relationship with him.